We are going to take a 2-week break from John. If you're visiting, we've been going through the Gospel of John. Just finished chapter 5. Looking forward to getting into chapter 6, but 2-week break. As we're doing this, I'm hoping that this works well. It worked pretty good first service. But what I'm going to do today, this isn't quite the right setting for it, okay? It's not the right setting. But what I want to do today, I wish we were instead sitting around a campfire. Just a few of us sitting around a campfire. I could share with you. You could be nice and toasty warm, making your s'mores, right? And that it would just be one of those cool times of just interacting with each other around a campfire. My hope, let's be honest, it could very well be more like, I'm going to end up by the end of this being more like the toothless old man with a corncob pipe on a rocking chair on his front porch who's just been telling you stories and cackling the whole time. I hope it's not that. I hope it is the first one, right? That it's more just us around a campfire. Our church is changing. Our church is changing. A good friend of mine, Tim Barton, has been at his church pastoring it for 35 years. When he had his 30th anniversary at his church, I said, Tim, what is it like to pastor the same church for 30 years? And his reply was, I haven't pastored the same church for 30 years. And the 30 years I've been here in this building, I've pastored 3 very distinct churches. At Christ the King, we're over 12 years old now. And our church over the last 2 years is very different than the church it used to be. And a lot of people that have been coming just don't know who we are. I've been getting a lot of questions. In fact, I spent Thursday night at somebody's house with a group of new people, and they just wanted to hear our story. And so I thought, you know what, let's do that today. We're going to take 2 weeks to have a break, and I want to talk about things like, what is our history? Where did we come from? Next week, I want to talk about what's happening right now in our church and where we're headed. Specifically today, I want to focus on the calling that led to us starting the church. I want to talk about our early years, and I want to talk about our recent history, right? The calling, the early years, and our recent history. But I just think it's really important for us to remember these things. I told my wife a few days ago that I was going to take a break from John. And her response was, really? I really like John. I was like, yeah, I need to take a break from John. She's like, okay. But I really like it better when we go verse by verse through the books of the Bible. I was like, I need to take a break from John just to tell people a little bit about us. She's like, are you at least going to have Bible verses? Joshua chapter 4. Joshua chapter 4 is this incredible story. After the Israelites have been wandering in the desert for 40 years, God brings them into the promised land. The 40 years in the desert, there were 2 distinct generations. One had all passed away, and they passed away in rebellion and a lack of faith, except for 2 people, Joshua and Caleb. And then there was a whole new generation that came up that lived by faith, and they obeyed the Lord. And in Joshua 4, we see the story about how they are now entering the promised land, and God works a miracle where he dries up the Jordan River, and they're able to cross again on dry ground into the promised land. And he tells the people, hey, from each of the 12 tribes, get one person from each of the 12 tribes, somebody that has some Scottish Highland background in them, because they're told, go across the river, and these 12 men, one from each tribe, get a large stone and put it on your shoulders and carry it across the river and set them up. This is what we read in verse 8. And the people of Israel did just as Joshua commanded and took up 12 stones out of the midst of the Jordan, according to the number of the tribes of the people of Israel, just as the Lord told Joshua. And they carried them over with them to the place where they lodged and laid them down there. And Joshua set up 12 stones in the midst of the Jordan, in the place where the feet of the priest bearing the Ark of the Covenant had stood. And they are there to this day. For the priest bearing the ark stood in the midst of the Jordan until everything was finished that the Lord commanded Joshua to tell the people, according to all that Moses had commanded Joshua. And why did they put the 12 stones there? It goes on to explain. So that when their children, their grandchildren, their great-grandchildren, and on through generations of hundreds of years would see 12 large stones next to the Jordan River standing up, they would say, "What is that?" And the parents and the grandparents were commanded to tell the next generation of all the things the Lord had done. That's what I want to do today. And this is important. This is like one of 3 times in the Old Testament. The first is with Jacob at Bethel when he sees the stairway of heaven and angels ascending and descending on the stairway. And he sets up a rock and he calls it Bethel, becomes Bethlehem. And it's just this incredible thing. Later, we see that with Samuel in 1 Samuel, I think 7, where he sets up a stone and calls it Ebenezer. Ebenezer. Do not name one of my grandchildren Ebenezer. Yeah, and it's just this memory stone to remember what God did. Today, I want to put up a figurative memory stone and tell you of the things God has done. The calling. How did we get started as a church? Years ago, I was an associate pastor doing worship at Canby Christian Church. I got to work under my dad. The Reverend Gary K. Davis, and all God's people said, "Whoop, whoop." Yeah, that was great. I loved working under my dad and with my dad. We have a great relationship. My dad and I are very different people. We do not have a lot in common, okay? We really don't. The biggest thing we have in common is our love for the Lord and our love for sharing the gospel with people. And that's pretty cool. I got to spend years working with my dad as a worship pastor. But I came to a point in my ministry where, although I was doing worship, I was starting to do more and more preaching and teaching. And I started feeling the Lord stirring me up. And I didn't know what to do. I didn't know, "Lord, are you want me to stay here and try to refocus what I'm doing? Do you want me to do something else? What's going on?" So I did something that on the surface sounds incredibly holy. But in reality, as I explained it, it really wasn't. I told the Lord, I'm going to spend up to a week in prayer and fasting, seeking you every day until I find out from you, do you want me to do something else? Do I just need to dig in right here? What do you want? Now, that sounds pretty holy, right? A week, prayer and fasting. Notice I said up to a week, right? I didn't really want to do it. And when I was young, I was misguided about spiritual disciplines and the way the Lord worked. I thought it was this thing where I do something that seems holy and I sacrifice, and somehow then he gives me a blessing. Side note, that's not the way God works. It's not like some kind of exchange. He's not Jeff Bezos, right? Bezos. It's not like Amazon and, if you pay for Prime, you get it quicker. Stuff like that. If God blesses you, he blesses you because of this thing called grace. It's a free gift. Guess what? He doesn't owe you anything. He doesn't owe you anything. And even the most righteous things we think we do, they're like filthy rags compared to him, right? I was kind of misguided. But I literally told the Lord, I want to hear from you. So, Lord, I'm going to do up to a week. But, Lord, please, it'd be nice if it was a lot quicker because I really want to eat, And the Lord blessed me the first day. I literally felt like the Lord told me that I was supposed to go out and start a church. Now, please understand, some of you right now are like, wait, you're saying the Lord spoke to you, and are you going to get nutty and weird? It gets even weirder, okay? I went home and I told my wife that, and she was like, really? Really? And if you knew me at that time, understand this, that was not on my radar at all. Here's the reality. It's hard to get the exact statistics, but probably around 85%, and that might be generous, of new churches, brand new churches, we call them church plants, 85% of them fail within the first year and a half to 3 years. Within church planting world, I've worked at 4 churches, and 3 have been church plants. We like to say, well, it wasn't fail. I mean, there was some stuff God did. Yeah, that's true. But considering most church plants and denominations start in such a way where they'll be like, hey, we need like several $100,000, if not like $1.5 million to start the church, and we want to start with multi-staff, and all this money and energy goes into it, right? And then to have something like that, like be gone within a year and a half to 3 years, that's not very effective, all right? Because that's what I had seen. I literally thought that church planters were just pastors who couldn't get a job anywhere else. That's what I thought. Like, who would want to go do that? And most of the church planters that I saw, it was like, I don't know about that guy. The church plants that went forward were the exception to the rule. So for me to hear from the Lord, I want you to plant a church, was like, okay. My wife and I talked about it, and she was not really on board. So we just said, let's pray about it. Let's pray about it, because I believe that if the Lord said that to me, he's going to confirm it in you, and he'll confirm that with other people. About a month later, on a Saturday night, I went down to the church where I worked. I was preaching the next morning, and I wanted to go to my office to get a book I had forgotten. I went in and I was walking through the kind of entryway foyer to the church, and at that time, there used to be a group of people that would meet on Saturday nights and spend time just praying for the Sunday morning services. That weekend, one of those people had out-of-town guests. And when I walked through the foyer of that church, this lady that I did not know suddenly stood up from the front of the church building, turned around, walked straight to me, walked up to me, and said, the Lord wants you to know that you're going to plant a church. You're going to do it this year, but here's the thing. You're going to have to step out in faith, because you're not going to know where the money's going to come from. Whoa! Now, I know there's at least one person hearing this. It's like, yeah, it's probably coincidence. God doesn't work that way. I have before you this thing called the Bible. And from beginning to end, he works that way. In it, we learn that he is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And just because it hasn't happened to you doesn't mean it doesn't happen. Let me say that again. Just because you haven't had something personally happen to you doesn't mean it does not happen. There are a lot of things in this world that I have not had happen to me, but I really believe that they're true. Case in point, I've never given birth, and yet I fully believe it is a true thing, right? It's just, wow, you guys are a hard crowd today. It's okay to laugh. Let's take this, coffee. Here's the deal. God spoke that way. And I went home and I told my wife. And I was so excited because it's like, wow, this wasn't just me, like, Lord, was that you that I heard? Was it not some other lady I don't know walking up to me out of the blue saying that? I was so excited. Babe, the Lord confirmed this in my life. And she was like, really? Really? Well, a month later, my wife and I were at a worship conference. We were there for 2 days. We didn't know anybody else at this conference. And there was probably 800 to 1,000 people there. We were sitting in some chairs in a main sanctuary during worship, and sitting next to us was a guy that looked like he was college age that we did not know. He stood up and he started to walk out in the middle of the service. My guess is probably use the restroom or something. And as he was walking, I looked over at him, and he goes like this. He's walking, he goes. And he turns around, starts to walk again, does the same thing. Looks around, looks right at Kamala and I. He walks over, and he says, I am so sorry. And please know this. I'm not crazy. I don't hear voices. Please, I'm sorry. I don't hear voices. And yet, I just heard a voice. I'm pretty sure it was God. And he told me to tell you that you're going to go out and plant a church. And that it's going to be this year. And that you need to step out in faith because you don't know where the money's coming from. You have no idea how much that saved us on marriage counseling because then she heard it too, right? We took time, the pastors of the church, praying about it. They confirmed that, the elders of the church, other mentors, and we stepped out and we started a church. It started, I kind of explained this a couple weeks ago, and some of you heard it, but literally on a Sunday, we went to a park, my family and I. We didn't know where we were going to start this church, but we went to Oregon City, and we went to a park, and I brought my guitar with me, and it started pouring down rain. It's, in the summertime, and it's dumping down rain. We ran under this covered building, and there was a lady there that we started talking to, and as we started talking to her, we found out she's a Christian, but she doesn't have a church she's attending, and I said, hey, well, as we sang songs together and did some stuff, I was like, you want to do this next week? She's like, okay. So next week, we invited some of our friends and people we knew, and a small group of people went to this park. The lady never showed up again, but other people did. And the first month, we had one group of people meeting. And the Lord blessed it, and it grew. And the second month, we had too many people. We were moved from a park to a coffee shop, and it was too many people. So we said, all right, let's put this into two groups. So second month, we had two groups. People kept coming. The third month, we had three groups. And the fourth month, we had 5 groups. And then we started having church services. That was in Oregon City. It was incredible. Those early years, you heard about the calling, but the early years were just incredible, and they were crazy. We did not know what we are doing. Can I let you in on a little secret? I still don't know what I'm doing. Oh, yes. Lord, was that you saying we know? Here's the deal. We were just dedicated to step out and serve him in faith, to tell people about him, to try to love on the people around us. And the Lord not only brought people, but he pruned people. And he brought people and he pruned people. And he brought people and he pruned people. And boy, were those hard lessons to learn. Man, it was incredible. People started coming. One of the highlights of those early years in Oregon City was a time where we had a barbecue, and I had one person that wanted to get baptized, and I said something, hey, if anyone else wants to get baptized at this barbecue, let me know. And and somebody else said, I want to get baptized. And so we had 2 people that wanted to get baptized, and we were having a barbecue at a park, and we went down the river, and while I'm baptizing 2 people, I did it, and I said, hey, does anyone else want to get baptized? And that day we baptized 28 people. There were too many people. Literally, people were walking out and just started baptizing each other. I'm like, wow, I don't know who that person is. Wow. Eventually, what happened is we were in Oregon City, and I started realizing it was kind of weird because really none of our groups that were meeting at that church were in Oregon City. They were all in other communities. And none of our leaders at that church lived in Oregon City. They were all from other communities. And eventually, the Lord opened the doors for us to start something here. He started stirring things up in me as I started watching my wife interact with people around her, and she knew all these people that were not Christians, but just had this great testimony with them. She's a great evangelist. I started looking at stuff, and I started talking to other pastors in town and started asking what they thought, and started getting thumbs up from all these other pastors and leaders saying, yeah, Canby can use another church. And the thing that sealed it was the Canby Adult Center. I went and talked to them. Can we meet here? And they said, yeah, Hope it's not going to cost too much. Well, how much? $40 a Sunday. Wait, I only have to pay you $40 a Sunday and I get to share the gospel with people? A year later, they apologized when they had to up the rent to $50 a Sunday. Oh. Eventually, we shut down the Oregon City Church and just had Canby. And we've seen the Lord do some incredible things. We started out here in Canby at the Canby Adult Center. And in those years, it was a very rough crowd. A lot of people were high schoolers or college-age people. A lot of people showed up that had addictions that were very broken. I used to say we met at the Canby Adult Center, and I had to clarify because I would say the word adult, and most of them would get the wrong idea, right? It was a rough crowd and not your typical church crowd a lot of times. But you look at it, and it was incredible what the Lord was doing. Absolutely incredible. Those were the early years. We saw groups come. We saw groups go. And through it all, we were a part of Christ the King Community Church. And I need to just share briefly what that means. Our church is Christ the King, and we are part of, originally, a multi-site church. What does that mean? An easy example for us to understand is to look at other things that are multi-site. In our community, the largest employer in Canby is what? Canby School District. It is a multi-site nonprofit. It means this. It is one organization that has one superintendent and a board of directors that set the mission, the vision, the big policies, the direction, the budgets of the entire school district. But underneath that umbrella are several different buildings and groups of people that meet in different locations. So over here you have a K-6, kindergarten through sixth grade school. Over there you have a K-6 school. And over there you have the really cool school that's K-8. You have a junior high, BPMS. Go Eagles. And you have the high school, Canby Cougars. Right? What's that? Getting into animal sounds. You look at it, and it is a bunch of different buildings with leaders and people working at the different buildings, and yet it is under one large umbrella. That's Christ the King Community Church. Started out of Bellingham, Washington. A friend of mine, Dave Browning, was the associate pastor at that church, and the church there in Bellingham is, like 5,000 people. They had on one Sunday somebody come up and ask, hey, Easter's coming up. Would you guys be willing to do an Easter service in the town I live in Mount Vernon? It's like 40 minutes away. So my friend Dave said, I'll do a Sunday evening service on Easter. He said, I'll bring some musicians, I'll come and I'll preach. Can you find a place for us to meet and invite your friends? The guy was like, okay, I'll do that. I'll find a place to meet, and I'll invite all of my friends. Dave didn't think it would go well, because in his own words, it's Easter evening, like at 6:30 at night. He was like, Jesus has been risen for several hours. All the Easter eggs have been found. It's not going to be that exciting. And yet, he showed up at an Elks Club early. They were having to open the doors and get the smoke out from the cigarettes. They were picking up beer bottles, mopping the floors, cleaning the tables. And this guy who brought his friends brought roughly 250 people. And it went so well that at the end of the night, Dave was like, hey, this is kind of fun. You guys want to do it next week? And they just started going from there. Dave started going to other communities. As people started saying, hey, I wish we had a church like this in our community, Dave would say, I'm free on Saturday evening. I'll bring a guitar player, and if you can find a place to meet and some friends, I'll show up. And within no time, he was in 5 communities, 5 different towns on a weekend. from Saturday morning to Sunday evening, preaching in different places. And eventually he realized I need to bring in other pastors to help with this. And eventually we started expanding more. At one time we were like over 30 churches in the U.S. with hundreds overseas, all under the umbrella of Christ the King Community Church. Absolutely incredible times. Yeah, I like that you clap for that. Yeah. That's what we are a part of. And it wasn't like the mission statement that really caught me with Christ the King. Can I tell you a secret? I've always hated the mission statement of Christ the King. It's huge. It's huge. It is like so large and massive, hardly anybody can memorize the thing. The vision statement, I've always heard the vision statement for Christ the King, and we're all supposed to have the same vision, and I'm like, yeah, that does nothing for me, right? Does nothing for me. But it was the culture of Christ the King that I loved. And here's just a few things. We talk at Christ the King about our values, all right? Stated values are how any church or any organization is going to function. Most businesses, organizations, clubs, churches have stated values. We're going to operate like this. Very few actually operate with their stated values. And for me, I'm like, man, Christ the King, we do everything we can. The first one that just attracted me was simplicity. Simplicity. Remember how I said that most church plants have to start with all kinds of money and they start with like huge worship teams, lots of full-time staff people. It's a thing where you're bringing in lights, fog machines, all kinds of stuff. That's not us. It's never been us. We like to keep it simple. If God's in it, it's going to grow. It's going to move forward. If God's not in it, we shoot it in the head and try something else, right? Why? Because we're Canby. That's what we do. It's just simple. In fact, the very first Christ the King, small church, at the time before it grew to be thousands of people, it was like 30 people, 40 people. And the pastor made all of the people sign a document. He said, look, we're too small. We can't be about everything else. We're only going to be about worship, small groups, and outreach. That's it. Worship, small groups, and outreach. With worship, they wanted to learn to love God more, so they worshiped him. With their small groups, they wanted to learn to love each other more, so they got together midweek and built community. And with outreach, they wanted to learn to love more people, and so they got out into the community. And for the first couple of years, from what I understand, he actually carried it with him in his pocket on Sunday mornings. And people would come to that pastor and say, Pastor, I have a great idea for a new ministry we need to start. Which, FYI, 99.9% of the time a pastor hears that, what we hear is, Pastor, I have a great idea for a brand new ministry you need to start. This man would pull out the contract and he'd say, you agreed. We're only going to be about these three things. So, we're still simple. We're still simple. A lot of people who have been coming over the last couple of years, you come from much bigger churches, sometimes a lot bigger. We can't do all the ministries that you're used to. We can't. We don't have the volunteers. We don't have the money. We don't have the bandwidth to do it. So let's keep it simple. And let's take the few things we can do and do them really well. In this season that we've been in, we've seen mega churches go online that have professional quality worship that you can watch online whenever you want. Right now, we have one camera on a little laptop, a few little lights. If I move forward like this too much, the camera starts freaking out. It doesn't know what to do. We will never be as good as the mega churches around us with our production. Quite frankly, I don't want to be. I want to be about one of our other values, community or relationship. And no megachurch can beat us at that right here in our town. At Christ the King, we're all about community, about relationships. We want to get to know each other. That's why when I said about the men's retreat coming up, that we're not going to just spend the whole time singing Kumbaya. We won't sing Kumbaya at all. No Kumbaya. And we're not just going to be preaching the whole time. We're going to hang out and have fun together. We're going to enjoy each other with our small groups that we have. I love it when our small groups hang out with each other. Sometimes our small groups go on vacations together. They go camping together. They go out to dinner together. They do fun things together. For our women's ministry, I don't know what you ladies do, and I'm not a lady, so you just do what you guys do at your ministry. Hopefully community stuff. I think it is, from what I hear. My wife tries to tell me about women's ministry, and as soon as she says women's ministry, I'm like, it's not men's ministry. I don't hear that. No, I don't know. I'm only saying that because our women's ministry director is sitting right in front of me, and she's giving me the eye right now. I'm just jabbing at you a little bit. Another one of our values that I love about our church is authenticity. Authenticity. Too many Christians are fake. Too many Christians wear masks. And if you're fake and you wear a mask, I'll just say this is probably not your fault. It's probably because you have been hurt at other churches. It's probably because you grew up in a church setting where you had to be fake. You had to wear a mask. Because if you were seen for who you really are, guess what? You're in trouble. The other day, this is the craziest thing. I was walking off the logging road in town where the disc golf course was, and they have all the wood chips on the trail. And I'm looking around, and they're like, man, there's been like a mole like tearing this up bad through here. And as I'm looking, I like jump back because I can see the mole. And this thing, this mole had brain damage, okay? This is like the dumbest mole I've ever seen. It was crawling quickly across the ground with its head under the bark, but everything from its shoulders back were above the bark. And I kept walking towards it, thumping, and it was going faster and faster, and it thought I couldn't see it. Oh, I could totally see it. For years, that was me. I would go to church and be fake and put on a mask. I thought I could cover my junk up. In fact, in churches, we think we're good at hiding, but here's the deal, we're not, and the world can see it better than we can see it, and it's one of the reasons they're turned off by us. At CDK, we want to be authentic, not transparent, authentic. What's the difference? Transparent means you can see everything. I'm completely exposed, and trust me, you don't want that, right? Here's the deal. I can be authentic, and in this setting, you will hear me say to you, man, this has been a rough week. Has anyone else had a rough week? I could use prayer. Any of you need prayer? You'll hear me be authentic like that. I've had people say, man, sometimes when you preach, I feel like you grab your chest and rip it open, and we see your heart beating. Isn't that great with Halloween coming up, that image, right? It's true. Speed of the leader, speed of the team. Because I want you to be real with me, I will be real with you. In a small group setting where it's more intimate and people that I'm closer with, I might share a little bit more. I'll be even more authentic, and I'll be like, hey, man, any of you had a hard week? This is a rough week. I'm having some relationship issues with some people. And it's causing stress for me, kind of anxiety when I see this person, and can you just pray for me? Transparent is probably what I need to do with another pastor, with my wife, with a mentor, with a counselor. Hey, I'm going to lay it bare. This is what's going on with this relationship and all the raw details that's happening. We want to be authentic and be real, the fact that we do struggle and seek help with that. I love the fact that at our church, there's empowerment and an entrepreneurial spirit. We like to try new things. We like to experiment. We're a young church. Our church has moved around a lot, and it means we get to try new things. That's one of those things, man. With COVID, it has totally messed us up. We ended up having to start the shutdown as a church a week before all the other churches because we were meeting in a school, and they shut down a week early. When that happened, Matt and I came up with plans. And within like a 24-hour period, we had plan A. this is what we're going to do as a church. We can't meet in the school, so here's what we're doing. We start telling our leaders, sending out messages, calling people, hey, this is our plan A. And that got blown up. So then we had to come up with plan B. And we had to be like, all right, let's call people, let's tell them this is plan B. And that one got flushed down the toilet. So then we came up with plan C. The same thing happened. Plan D, the same thing happened. Within 24 hours, we had 5 different plans. And our church didn't bat an eyelash at that. Because our church has always been used to changing, trying new things, being okay with that. Such grace as our church was like, it's okay, Pastor. It's okay. We know it's Matt's fault. But to try new things and to empower people to try new things. As I talked last week about our community groups, did you notice? I don't want to control your group. It might be a part of our church, but I want to find out, how has God gifted you as a host, a leader? What is he doing in your particular community group? What are the needs there? How does he want to develop this little ministry into a very unique thing that's different from the other groups? Because that's how God works. Look at it. We have 4 gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. They're very different gospels, but they're all saying the same thing. That beauty and the uniqueness of each of us with our giftings, each group is different. I don't want to control your group. In fact, the thing I love most is when I find out our church is doing stuff I don't know about. There was one time I was at my friend Greg's house, and I was there for hours one evening, and his wife Trisha came home. And I said, hey, Trisha, how's it going? Like, going good. I was just at women's Bible study. And I started talking to her about the women's Bible study she's been attending. And I was like, so what church is this with? CTK. I was like, what? She goes, the women's Bible study at our church. I was like, we have a women's Bible study? Yeah, you didn't know that? I'm like, no, I had no clue. Really? Just you and a couple? No, there was a big chunk of women going to this women's Bible study. I'm like, is this brand new? No, we've been going 5 months or so. I went and talked to the 2 ladies that were leading it, and they were embarrassed. They're like, I thought you told them that we were. No, I thought you checked it out. And is there an apology? I'm like, no, don't worry about it. This is awesome. God just encouraged you guys to step out, and without any help or anything, you took the gifts you had and started inviting other people, and it's been multiplying and growing. Who am I to say, no, you can't follow the Holy Spirit? That's awesome. I love it. I'm on the board at the Canby Center. I love it when I go to the Canby Center and I find out wow, look at this. People came and volunteered and organized this whole section, and they're like, yeah, it was from your church. I'm like, awesome. I didn't know that. I have been empowered at our church to step into my gifts and use them. I can do nothing better. And in fact, according to Paul in Ephesians, that's my job, is to help you discover how God has created and called you into ministry. And we're going to talk more about that next week. Guys, these are the things about our church that I love. And if I can just go ahead and stop now because it's in. I had one more point. Wow, look, God's growing Tim. He stopped when it was time. Today I told you a little bit about us. I wish I could have done this with you and just a couple friends around a campfire. But the Lord is blessing our church, and there's too many new people. I can't keep them all straight. I have 3 daughters. I get their names confused. I have nicknames for them. It's because I don't know their real names. I love the fact that there's so many new faces. And I wish I could have done it individually with you. But I hope that this helped you understand a little bit about us. I'm going to come back next week. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about us. What God is doing right now in our church. Because there's major changes happening in our church. And where we're going from here. Lord, I love you. The words coming to mind are empowered. I thank you that you empowered my wife and I to step out years ago to do ministry. I thank you for all the ministry that's taken place over the years. People have come and grown in you and then gone back out and taken your message other places. Even friends here today who were a part of us and are visiting, and now some of the DNA from this church is in other places. Lord, I'm excited for what you're doing today. I thank you for my friends, my brothers, my sisters that are coming today, that you have given us a place where we can be real. We can admit that we're scared, we're anxious, that we've been burned by the church, that we're depressed. And we can also admit that we're walking in victory, that we're having good things happen, and all the while we can do this together, seeking your face. I trust you with the future of this church because you have never failed. I pray all this in the precious name of Jesus Christ, and everybody said,